Hey everybody, Edo here, and I am excited because I have Vincent from Lucky Duck Games. Say hello, Vincent.
Hi guys, thank you so much, Ed, for
And
having me.
Vincent, how do you pronounce your last name properly?
Yeah, Vergonjeanne, Vergonjeanne.
I didn't even try. Well, and so
You know,
I'm really excited to have you on, Vincent, because you've been in the scene. You're pretty new. Your big sort of entry was Vikings Gone Wild, which was a huge campaign and a fabulous game, and you've been growing since. But that was probably 2 years ago. Is that right?
that was 1 year ago.
1 year ago. I mean, you're brand new, but you've sort of been plowing through, and you're doing some really interesting things. So I have a series of questions to ask you. But to start, you're in Poland, right? Where in Poland are you?
Yeah, I'm in Krakow.
Some,
Kraków.
and like it, for
But I'm
those who know
French.
what
I'm French.
Poland look like, where is that in Poland?
It's like there's literally right in the center you have Warsaw, which is the capital, and I think it's 300 kilometers south. You have Kraków, right south. So yeah, and it's a lovely city. It used to be the capital of Poland for centuries, up until Warsaw became it like a few decades ago. So it's a lovely city with a lot of medieval place.
It used to be. Anyway, we'll put Polish politics aside.
Fair enough.
So okay. To start, I mean, I know you have a background in video games, but if you can collapse it a little bit, I like to do this in all my videos and the Q&As. How did you jump from video games into board games? I mean, what was that transition? Were you playing? Tell that story.
It's a fair point. So for the last 9 years, I've been running a video game company, my own companies. One in France called Kobojo. We used to have 100 employees. We were called the French Zynga. We had a lot of daily traffic and a lot of social gaming traffic and Facebook. I moved to Poland in 2014. 2014. And created a new studio called Everyday I Play. This time focused on mid-core games. And for the last 9 years, I've been trying to sell physical stuff to my players. We sell digital goods, but why not sell physical goods? And we have failed miserably for the last 7 years on that subject. We basically try to sell only anything you can do on demand, right? We're not going to do anything
T-shirts, cups,
too crazy.
mugs, that kind of thing.
Exactly. None of this ever sold. Maybe three. We sold three. 2 years ago, my brother comes to me and asks me for some arts to make a board game. Exactly. And I tell him, well, I'm going to give you art if you make me a board game for that game. It was Vikings Gone Wild. It took him 6 months. I met with him at my parents' house. We tried the game, and I'm like, wow, that was actually really good. I want to do this. I have no idea how to do it yet, but I want to do this. We're wealthy enough as a video game company to kind of have that kind of pet project, so we did it. And 2 months after working on art and box, we showed this to the players, and the answer was insane. It was the first time that we had a physical product that people actually wanted. We were like, well, it's not on Amazon. Where can I find it? Wow, it's not ready. And it really put the finger on something that was interesting. And looking back, I think it's because a T-shirt, a mug it's an identification, and you're not going to brag that you're playing a small mobile game called Vikings Gone Wild. However, a board game is the promise of a continued emotion. Oh, sure. The board game, maybe I can play with my son, maybe I can play with my wife, and get back to that emotion. We eventually launched that Kickstarter, did extremely well for us, but after that Kickstarter, or even before that Kickstarter, I realized that Everyday I Play is not going to be able to do this. This is such a different field, and as much as we wanted it to be a pet project, it's not going to work out this way. I create Lucky Duck Games at this point, and there's also other event happening at Everyday I Play, which is important noticing. The mobile market really densed up. There's so much people making video games. I think the latest stat was between 500 and 1,000 games are released a day.
Well, and the board game scene's starting to catch up, sir.
Yes, it does, but it's way still behind. I mean, the barrier to entry to make a video game is so low. that we're talking about 500 games a day. Like it's really hard to comprehend the amounts of video games being put out there. So I thought there was a very interesting transition here that I wanted to explore, which is to capitalize specifically on video game IPs, which are all my friends for the last 9 years. I've been to not Gen Con actually. I've been to the Gamescom actually in Germany. So so all those people who used to be my friends, my competitors, have become my friends and my partners now. For the last year, we have signed some major IPs. Yeah, no, it's true. So so we have signed Fruit Ninja. We have signed.
So let me interrupt Let me interrupt you for a second. So, it's a little bit choppy. I hope the audio seems to be coming in through great. So, to anyone watching, sorry, it's a little bit choppy. But he's in Poland. But the second point, the thing that you're starting to talk about is really important, and one of the key things I wanted to ask you about. So, from the get-go, you've said, "Hey, I want to take mobile or video game IP and make games out of it and connect with the audiences," right? And that. Everybody thinks about IPs all the time, but traditionally I think a lot of people think of just the bigger brands and not necessarily active brands, but Lord of the Rings. I mean, I guess they're active, but brands that are sort of big splash brands, not necessarily captive audience brands. And when you think of Vikings Gone Wild and you think of Zombie Tsunami, these aren't games that the only people who've ever heard of those games are the people playing them, basically. And so,
absolutely,
but presumably the reason it works is it may be a smaller audience, but it's an engaged and interested audience that has nice overlap with games. So, in terms of, and then you were just mentioning you signed Fruit Ninja and you went, there's like never heard of to top game for years on mobile, right? That's a huge leap. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So I think this is like a main topic of this call. So to start, philosophically, what are the key things you keep in mind when you're thinking about, I mean, I assume you're always going to do this IP. So what's like your basic plan or strategy in terms of selecting IP and thinking about it and going through it?
So the key thing of the IP I work on is that most of them are online games. I've seen I've seen IPs really struggling on Kickstarters. Actually, you think about movie IPs and stuff like that. There's a total recall happening right now from some great publishers really struggling to find traction. So when you think of an IP, it's not necessarily something that's going to bring you traffic. So I come from the online gaming, and the one thing with online gaming is that those people come back to those games every day. And so I'm looking for a game that has at least 3 or 4 years existence and still has at least 1 million daily users. Those are big demand, but there are those games, and those games, given the small percentage of people will translate, this number will bubble up in a way that makes this IP interesting because they are active. They are not just culturally in our social, like in our social cultural tissue. I would say, it takes forever to become Star Wars because many movies and merchandising to really become in the inconscient cultural sphere. What's interesting with the IP I work with is that they are not so cultural, but they can reach tomorrow morning for every single day people playing those games.
Right.
The other thing, that's a really important thing about the IP we have. The other things, there's 2 kind of IP we're targeting. One big mission, and that's really for me, having put together companies for almost 10 years, it's important that we know why we're doing things. And I have a personal story behind board game. I'll tell you something. 2 years ago, my wife and I, we are on this daily routine. We're going back from work, turning on the TV, putting the kids to bed, turning on the TV, turning on our phone. We're not even talking to each other. We're not doing great. And that's when I started to bring some board game back home. And I'll tell you something, it saved my couple. The fact that we started to actually stop zombing in front of the TV and starting to play, and I could really recognize that. So bring this realization that actually board game really brought some positive stuff in my life. I wanted to get brands that could bring this to people, and I think the hobby is growing. And taking license like Fruit Ninja, the goal was to be able to reach out people who play solo on those mobile game. I have a brand they can recognize, but bring them back out of their device to a tabletop experience,
Sure.
to play with their family, to their stuff. It sounds a little cliche, but it's not. It really is.
Well, it's a lot of
something.
it's a lot of how the industry is growing right now is that sort of counter digital culture that's happening a little bit.
Absolutely, I think there's this need of renewed social tissues in sense. Fabric. Sorry, tissues is another word. The social fabric. But so there is IP that are meant for this for me, which is really trying to have this very large audience that are more like casual game, easy to approach, easy to put on the table, and then we also have a more mid-core, hardcore IPs we're looking for.
You sound like a typical mobile publisher.
Because I was for 9 years.
It's like sounds like the French Zynga. I don't know. Anyway, keep going.
But and so the other audience is obviously more mid-core, hardcore. I wish I could tell you the IP where I'm talking with right now. There are some really exciting stuff. It's not science, so I can't talk about it. But the idea was to be able to bring a more Euro crunchy thing on top of IPs we can relate to.
Sure.
That are for an expert audience or thing that we have played ourselves for years and we're excited to bring into a different shape. So basically the audience it touches and the fact that those IPs are active and can reach on a daily basis people. That's the two things.
All right. So to look at it, right? You want an active IP. You want to have been around for a while. You want to have those daily users. So that's sort of like your requirements. And you talked about what you're basically saying. Hey, we're targeting some casual stuff and we're targeting some mid-core, hardcore stuff. So that's sort of step A. What do you want? When it comes to because. I mean, again, and I think there are a lot of people interested in brands, and I think it's novel in your case. You have your video game history, but you're still relatively new to board games. So, like, why should you get a brand versus anyone else? When it comes to approaching brands and engaging with brands and setting those things up, how do you go about it? I mean, is it you? Do you have somebody doing business development? How do those conversations happen? How do you secure the brand you want?
This is the trickiest part, obviously, and I'll tell you why. It's because signing a brand, it's like raising money. It's you'll never raise money if you don't get an intro to a venture capitalist. Actually, it's funny. There is venture capitalists having a full talk about the fact that I've never signed a startup money. I've never given the money to anyone, and it was not meant to. But 100% of the money I gave as a venture capitalist was from people I was introduced to, and I've done this for a year, approaching a lot of IP. And there is the one that I knew directly. Hey, how you doing? I have an ID. Sure, Vincent, that sounds great, which is the easiest, right? But there was the one that I didn't know, and there was two ways to approach it. Either I send this cold email. Hi, my name is Vincent, and I come from this, and this is 98% never a single answer. This is
Sure.
rough, rough. So the only way for me to sign Break Fruit Ninja, I literally wrote an email to them, never got an answer. Then go through LinkedIn, go through people who actually know someone there, give them a phone call. How you doing, my friend? Can you give me a hand? Could you make me an intro to this person over there? Sure, no problem, I'll do it. Or maybe, no, I'm not really in touch with them. So getting that first contact is everything. Just to break it, the cold email is just not going to work.
Well, let's talk about LinkedIn for a quick second. I mean, from my professional career in video games and otherwise, I'm very familiar with LinkedIn and active on it. Some people in the board game space might not be as much. I haven't tried to fill in that network. I might need to do that at some point. But, LinkedIn is a great alternative to Facebook and Twitter and these other social media sites. You're not on LinkedIn necessarily going to use it as a promotional channel, although some people try to. I don't really think so. What you're really doing is you're establishing your network of contacts and who you know, and it gives you some avenue or window into who they know. And you really can. Exactly. You can try to, cold call through LinkedIn with their in-mail, which, may or may not work. But ideally, it just lets you know, oh, hey, Vince knows a guy over there. I know Vince. I'm going to ask Vince to talk to that guy. So it's helpful in understanding how your network grows and expands from a corporate business company-to-company basis. And I highly recommend everyone engage with LinkedIn as part of their
absolutely
network.
actually, I'll tell you something. For 7 years or 8 years, on like for my entire video game career, I've never professionally connected on Facebook, and it's only for the last year that I've extended for the first time that I had to break out of my kind of Facebook stuff to actually include, because most of the profession, the pros are actually actively there, and actually there's this thing about this industry that's a lot more friendlier, more smaller, a lot more community oriented, that allowed me to actually break out of actually make those people my friend, actually really became my friend. So that's, and I never connected with any of this industry on LinkedIn. It's just so it's a funny thing. But on the video game side, a very, very strong LinkedIn approach for the last 9 years. So that's the way, and it's really key. And then the next thing, obviously, then it's conversation, and it's proving that you have experience, and it's going to be negotiation. Those licenses are not free. Some license will want a minimum guarantee. Some license will want a lot of fees. Royalties. So there's a bit of mix in the middle, and it's just your experience on how to convince, and also to not get hurt too hard, because you should not sign something if it really puts you in danger.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. I mean, I'm sort of one big chunk of this is this whole branding thing or licensing thing. But so we know how to select. You know how to you can try cold calling, but you really need to have a contact that can introduce you, validate you, all those things. Now you're getting into that contract phase. Now, most IP holders, I feel like you've dealt with a couple different types. On one hand, it sounds like on some of the smaller games, smaller brands, you might be the first person to ever reach out to them asking for them to license their game on their content. And in the case of
Absolutely.
Fruit Ninja, they get reached out to everybody. So how do you vet that out up front? And then again, just in terms of you rattled it off, but like, what do you think are the key considerations? Like in essence, hey, watcher, if you're going into a IP negotiation, here's what you should keep in mind.
Let me think about that. Also, first of all, as you said, there's two approaches. Either they have ever signed a licensing deal before, or they are not. If they have not, typically you need to come with your own contract. I have my own contract. It's literally a 4-page contract. I think having something short that just underline what they are in for and what you are in for, that protect both parties. Typically, you want to be protected if they lost their IPs, and they want to be protected if whatever happened with the product, something swallowed, whatever. That's the base foundation that they would be expected from both parties, protecting each other from anything happening. And so something short, typically you'll be driving the percentage and everything. I can give you a bracket if you have never done it. It basically goes between like a very extinct IP to something to like 5% to up to 15% from like a very active IP. Those percentage typically
percent of what you royalty off of sale price.
It's typically from what's called your net invoiced. So when you sell to distributors, you have this 60% off. So it's 15% of that 40%
of your take.
Exactly. Again, after there is different stuff. On some, if there's really a lot of risk, you could ask them you can try to negotiate to actually also deduct the price of manufacturing. On some, there will be the most experienced one will say, no, this cost of manufacturing is your cost, not mine. So there is a lot of granularity. So, but typically, if they have not done it, you need to come with this document, and I really recommend you to keep it short, to not overwhelm them, and also not throw yourself into too much paperwork. For the biggest one, they will come with their stuff, and the biggest one typically they will. And I have had a couple of those. It will come with a 30-page contract, and it's going to be painful. You're gonna have to read through everything. You're gonna have to typically those contracts are made to put everything to take the quilt on the side of the licensor. They are crafted already, everything on the side. So what you're going to do is typically 2 to 3 months of negotiation getting a little bit on your side. This is too rough. This is not going to work in my context. If you want to work on this, it has to be that terms. Oh, we want to have an app for this, so we need to be able to do it. There's a lot of negotiation, and their contract will already be made in a way that everything is on their side. So you need I've been dealing with contract my entire life, so I'm very typically I negotiate for 2-3 months, and only at the end, once I have something that I feel is solid enough, I give that final contract to a lawyer to make sure that I didn't miss any major stuff in there. Sure. To not also, it's very easy to waste a lot of money in lawyer fees in this type of big contracting, because lawyers will always tell you, be careful with that and that. I can rewrite it for you. I've also given a lot of money to lawyers in my life, so I've also learned on how to put them just at the end and try to do as much upfront game. But if you have no experience with those, you should definitely get a lawyer in the middle.
And something just to note for anyone considering this, especially somebody small or somebody who's never done an IP before, somebody who's going to try to get an IP and do a Kickstarter, right? Like, working with brands is a big deal. Like, it's not, not to say working with another person and a friend or an artist isn't a big deal, but suddenly when it's a professional company with a professional brand, whether it's the legal documentation, the accounting, the payments, you're sort of stepping into a much more real relationship in a big way. So you really got to be confident, but you also need to take the time to review contracts and know what the assumptions are and understand, what the minimum guarantee means and when you have to pay, and expect that they're going to follow you for it. Every company you work with is different, so I don't want to paint it all the same. But it's just really to say, we're going to go after this, use this IP for XYZ. It's a big deal. I see people all the time on Facebook in these communities. They're like, hey, if I could get this, if I could get that. I mean, sometimes you can go get it, especially there's like a big run for sort of unused, cornered IP. That doesn't mean the company, even if it's an old IP they're willing to give you, that doesn't make the company any nicer. It just means the IP smaller. And it's just really important that people understand what they're getting into when they take these on.
Absolutely, absolutely. And minimum guarantee generally is $, so everybody pays attention to it. But there is much more subtle things you need to be careful in a contract. Typically, there's something called the basically when you lose the license at the end of your contract or everything's in breach, sure. There is called the sell-off period. And typically those big 30-page contracts generally have a 0-day sell-off period. Well, You want to put a sell-off period. If you've never thought about that, then the day this finished, you're like, oh wait, I have all these boxes that I cannot sell anymore because there is no sell-off period in that contract. It's a lot of subtleties. And depending on the license, there is also a lot of delays in validation because they are basically master of their brand. A funny fact: I found the biggest brand much more reactive and have the least friction to their art and their stuff than the smaller one, who are like more scared about what we do with it.
It's their baby. They're not professional necessarily. But so things to keep in mind: targeting what you're going to get, contacting them, getting the contract. You've secured your dream IP. Then there's this piece, and I worked at Disney for a long time, and I've dealt with tons of IP. Actually, Disney Hidden Worlds is a mobile, Facebook and mobile game I made. Literally used all of Disney IP, so it was like it's crazy. But anyway, wow. The animated ones. But the point is, once you then are working on the project, you will then have to go through some sort of IP review process. And that's not necessarily, if it's a small company and this is the first thing they've ever done, that's one exchange. But the bigger the company, the more they're going to expect to be reviewing art, having sign-off, and have all these requirements for that. And we're at about 25 minutes, but any straightforward advice for that process?
The idea is to look at what has been done around this IP and try to stick as close to what they did. I would say the biggest challenge with IP, and I've been changing my process in the last year. Typically, a big IP will give you a time at the one they expect you to release the game, and I had this conversation many times to understand why there is such pressure. The pressure comes from the fact that, hey, we're giving you RP, and we don't want you to sit on this for 3 years before you get a board game outside. So here is the deadline we want you to release a board game. But I'm like, by giving me this deadline, which is typically 6 months to a year from the signature of the contract, you're basically essentially forcing me to release something no matter what is the quality of it. And that's not good neither for you or for me. So generally there's a lot of negotiation to try to push it as far as possible. I've kind of reversed my process. I used to first try to get an IP and then work on the project, or as I was getting the IP, I already started to either get game designers to submit a prototype around that IP. But the change now is that I'm actually looking for good games. That have already been cooked and brewed and playtested for a year and a half. That's really like crunchy, well done, and really theme up that game with this. And like for Fruit Ninja, we've been lucky to have a very extensive reach. We received like over 20 prototype total for it,
brand.
And so and because of it, we really managed to secure some really good game, and it took us 6 months to finish, but that was a big thing, and you need to be very careful in that process. If you get an IP, they will force you to release at a certain point, and you need to negotiate for it to be pushed as far as needed for you to do a good game behind.
Oh, totally. And I know their perspective as well, whether they have a slate or a lineup or a timeline. No one wants, I was looking at a contract for Herbaceous at some point, and it was like they wanted a 2-year release window. It's like, man, that's a long time, and if something doesn't go right. Anyway, so the thing I want to bring up quickly, that in listening to you, I really think it's worth noting how much you're taking this, and I don't mean this in a bad way, I mean this in a good way, but from a business perspective, right? You're not saying, hey, I have all these games I'm making and I want to... You're saying, no, I'm looking for this type of IP, I'm setting up this type of partnership, and I'm sourcing the right kind of games to support it. It's not, I'm not just making something up on the spot, and it's not necessarily my designs. I'm actually looking like an IDW or USopoly or these other companies that are basically like brand secured, project secured, release and grow. You're obviously smaller, and you're, I think, novel in your approach to what kind of brands you're looking for in particular, as opposed to just the big ones. But it's very much that model, as opposed to, and you're indie, but it's not necessarily the typical indie Kickstarter model. Your first game, in a way, was, right? Because Vikings Gone Wild, it was your brother's design, you're working on it together. That's more your typical story, but you've now transitioned to an operational business that you're trying to grow, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we're 4 people full time on this. So it is,
which is a lot, man. That's a lot of people.
Which is a lot of people. So I would say 2 things. I think that I've been in the business of making games for almost 10 years now. I've changed. It's a very refreshing changes to go to board game in many ways, for the people in this industry, for the format, the physical thing. After doing stuff digitally for 9 years, they love the touching. But if I want to make it a place where I can pay myself and not something just on the side, it has to be well planned, well executed, and there is money aspect related to it that can't be underlooked. I first started to co-design all the IP I was talking to, and I quickly realized I couldn't do it. I couldn't be, and I say really me, Vincent, I had to choose what is the path for Lucky Duck. Is it just a studio for my brother and I to kind of do another Vikings Gone with one hour game, or are we going to become a publisher? And I realized that if I wanted a bit of a growth and take this publishing job seriously, I couldn't be both. And that's about 8 months ago that I started to reach out to external game designer and organize basically those private and confidential contest around brands to try to get the stuff. And it's been very good, because the truth is I want to put out very good games and not necessarily come from me. My strength is marketing, communication, the IP, and it's very empowering to work with game designer who have the time to work on the whole, not I mean the actual content itself, and bring together the stuff. And generally, either I make 1 to 2 games a year by myself, maybe 1 game a year, to be honest, by myself, and it will be a very different business than what I'm trying to do. There is, I own business for 9 years, so there is a part of me that wants this to grow, and so I had to break out from the my game kind of model.
Yeah,
but still with.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say it. Exactly. I mean, right. I think it's important that you said this at the beginning of the call. I didn't call it out, but this sort of, you need to know what you're trying to do as a company, right? You need to know what you're trying to do as a person and what you're trying to do as a company. And I think that helps drive these types of decisions a long way. We're going to get cooked in a second, because after my Mike Pascal video, I'm very conscious of not going over maybe 30, 33, 34 minutes, or my whole machine shuts down. I'm going to try to maybe do a Kickstarter at the end of the year. But I did want to ask you, and just in a couple like bullets, what's gaming in Poland like? What's Poland like? Like what's that scene?
Poland is the 3rd largest board gaming country in Europe. It is a booming country in terms of board games. We have 3 board game cafes in Krakow, and they are packed all the time. There is tens of publishers, mostly relying on importing external product to Poland and translating them. There is hundreds of local shops. It is a booming, and it's the 3rd one. France, Germany, 3rd is Poland. Period. So it is a very, very active. There are also some major game designer coming from Poland. There's a Portal Games, Ignacy. There is this major the people who did This War of Mind, and they did just a monster Kickstarter recently at $1.7 million with I forgot their name, but those guys are in Poland as well. Very, very smart people. Very well organized as well. I personally love Poland. I was supposed to be here 6 months. It's been 4 years, and I have no plan to move out. My wife and I we used to live in California, and actually we still have our business entity set up over there. But we live in Poland, and there is no short-term planning to leave, and it was really not expected. It's just lovely people, great city.
Well, and generally speaking, when you think of gamers in the States and gamers and board gamers in Poland, is Poland essentially what you in the States you typically think of sort of a Euro style game, or are they different? I mean, how would you characterize them?
Full scope. It just depends. Yeah. It's there is obviously, I think there is a full scope. There are like very big gamer guy buying all this. Actually, there's a couple really big publisher here that really import every top stuff from everything that's made by Fantasy Flight Game, by Asmodee. All this is released in Polish day one. So it's not like Poland is getting everything a year later. They're like everything is released day one. Like the Dice Forge was released day one. All the Star Wars stuff are released day one. I mean, it's a scene that's really much in sync with the US, much smaller, yet still 3rd biggest one in Europe. So a pretty important one.
Cool. Well, listen, it has been a pleasure having you on. I think we could have spoken for another half an hour, but
for sure.
Thanks for joining, and thanks everyone for watching, and play some great games. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye, everybody.